Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about painting miniatures from start to finish and everything in between. And this is part 93, Alaitoc, specifically on Alaitoc Craft World color scheme for Eldar. I've decided to cover a couple Eldar color schemes requested by you, and starting with Alaitoc. It's a really cool blue and yellow color scheme. So we'll start off with this, of course, Guardian, because they're the foundation of an Eldar army. And we'll start off with Cantor Blue, a nice dark royal blue. And so I, of course, thinned it down using some matte medium, matte acrylic medium. And I applied this thin down Cantor Blue because it's quite thin, because you can see all the details. The key is with this is we're going to be doing a lot of colors over each area, so it's always good to thin down your paints. That way you get nice detail in the end and it doesn't obscure any detail. The key is just get a nice solid foundation before proceeding to the next step. So I covered the entire armor part minus the head, which is going to be yellow, with Cantor Blue. And later on I did do the center of the helmet as well between takes. So it's the center of the face as well, supposed to be blue, but everything but the helmet itself is going to be blue. So I applied a nice thin layer of Cantor Blue over the entire model, and then I touched up any areas that required it before proceeding to the shade. And when that was dry, of course, then it's time to give it a shade. So I gave it a Drakenhoof Nightshade because it's blue. You want to hit it with a blue shade. Makes sense. So I then took the Drakenhoof Nightshade directly from the pot and put it in on all of the armor. And this is going to get in the recesses and give a lot of definition and shading to the areas that need it. That way it goes really, really dark. Cantor Blue plus Drakenhoof Nightshade is really, really dark blue. So it gives some really strong depth to the recesses. And of course, once you hit an area, make sure the entire area is covered before proceeding to the next area, and let it completely dry before proceeding to highlighting. You do not want to crack the shades because it really shows when you're painting the model. When it was completely dry, I went back to Cantor Blue, and I then started to highlight it up again. Basically focusing on all the raised areas and leaving the recesses and the edges shaded, and basically highlighting everything else up with the Cantor Blue. And the reason why I went back to the base color is that I don't want too extreme of a difference between the raised areas, and I'm building up one color at a time, so I don't want it to be too extreme of a highlight for the next step, which is also why I'm mixing colors heavily in this tutorial, as you're going to see. It's just to create more blending. And obviously I thin down all my paints, and I use a wet palette to save the paint so that I can just keep using it and mixing it as I please. And then I took some Calidor Sky and I added to my Cantor Blue, do a 1-1 mix of Cantor Blue and Calidor Sky. And I use this to highlight up the areas. What I did was I started off on the raised areas, and I focused my way towards the recesses, and I stopped a little bit short of where I did the previous step. So it's a bit of a grade. Now, as I said, these are thinned down once again, so they'll blend a lot more nicely when they're dry. But as you can see, I'm just building up layers. So I'm focusing on more and more raised areas, like the chest areas. I left the more hidden areas, the Cantor Blue, and building up this lighter shade of blue on all the other areas of the model. Leaving the Cantor Blue in the more hidden areas, like the gaps in the armor plates and just the recesses and stuff. As you see, the goal is to build up all the raised armor plates with this combination. And as you leave the Cantor Blue on the underside, because that way it creates a nice shading. And since this is thinned down, it'll blend quite nicely. And then I took some Teclis Blue and did a 1-1 mix of Teclis Blue and Calidor Sky, creating a bit of a light color. And for this, I'm just doing an edge highlight of areas that I really want to draw the eyes to, like the chest, the tops of the shoulder blades, the tops of the knees, tops of the arms, and just do a nice edge highlight along these armor plates. The great thing about Eldar is they have such beautiful lines and beautiful detail on them, And these edge highlights are a very simple way of really making the colors pop and stand out and draw the attention of the viewer to them. And just gives a great extra step. So I always recommend doing a nice edge highlight with a light color over these armor plates. It really brings the attention to the complexity of their armor. And once again, it will dry slightly darker and more blended in. So as I said, just focusing on the raised tops of the knees, tops of the feet, doing nice edge highlights over all the areas that you really want to stand out, and usually letting the light source and the armor plates dictate where you should. Now that the blues are done, it's time to focus on the yellow, which is just the head. And as I said, I'm going to paint the face blue using the same colors, Cantor blue, and then the same combination of highlights as well after in between takes. But for the helmet itself, I just start off with Averland Sunset. It's a nice color. It's a really rich yellow, a deep golden yellow. And of course I thinned it down and then applied it to his helmet and his piece of cloth that's around his belt. This is pretty close to the actual color we want it to be, but we're going to then hit with a shade. Now for the shade, you have two options basically. If you really want the recesses to be a bit orangey, like really orangey, apply it directly from the pot like I'm doing here. But if you want them to be a little bit closer to yellow, I recommend diluting it with a 1-to-1 mix of water and Casandor yellow. The problem is with Casandor yellow is that it dries orange because dark yellow is orange, essentially. So as you can see, it does give an orange tint. And I don't mind it because it's a golden orange tint, but if you really want it closer to the yellow, I recommend diluting it. Next, I went back to the Averland Sunset in a similar way that I did the blues, and I built up the yellows, then focusing on the raised areas, leaving the underside of the helmet, the shaded area, and leaving gaps, slight gaps around the details of the helmet. That way you're building up, highlights and leaving the recesses in the edges, the shaded areas. And then I went to Aerial Yellow, of course, because Aerial Yellow, perfect color, Aerial Eldar. And I once again started at the top of the helmet and built up layers. And you see in this case, I kind of ignored the underside of the helmet. And I just built up the layer on the forehead and the jawline, leaving the Averland Sunset closer to the edges. And finally, the last color, Flash Gets Yellow. And for this, I'm just doing a quick edge highlight of the details of the helmet. Now, the highlight of the helmet, I would just really like to do the area around the center of the face, basically. So as you can see here, I'm just going along the edges of the face, and really just helps draw your attention to the center of the helmet. And once again, will dry slightly more blended because you thin down your paints. And that's it. So now you know how I paint up an Alaitoc color scheme, the Alaitoc Craft World color scheme for Eldar. I really hope you enjoyed it. This is just a simple tabletop standard, and it really works. And you can paint the gems using the same fashion that I painted the gems in Miniature Painting 101, and the eyes in the same fashion. And then you have a painted Alaitoc Eldar. So thank you as always for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. I really hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for next week's episode, part 94, which is just around the corner. But if you don't want to wait for next week, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel. We're not only going to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes before anyone else. You get to see almost 100 start-to-finish painting tutorials, battle reports, face-off episodes, an Airbrush 101 series, so just tons of wargaming content, over 300 videos. So go check out The Warp. I think you'll love it. Stay tuned for more videos. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.